Welcome to this budget special edition of Mint TV, where we get you today on the show our editor's verdict on P. Chidambaram's budget for 2013. A quick introduction of our esteemed panel. First, extreme to the left, we have R. Sukumar, who is editor Mint. Anil Padmanabhan, sitting next to him, he's the deputy managing editor Mint. And Monika, Halan, editor Mint Money. Thank you all for joining us on the show today. Sukumar, let me begin by asking you, did budget 2013 surprise you?
It didn't surprise me. But it wasn't really what one expected either, because if you looked at the run-up to the budget, we all knew that there wasn't much that Chidambaram could do. But I think in some ways expectations had been stoked, and one, because Chidambaram is very articulate. Two, whenever he speaks, especially to people from the financial community, he's very, very positive about what he says. So I think subconsciously at that level, I think expectations had built up, even for me. So it wasn't what I expected, but it didn't come as a complete surprise to me either, because I think at the end of the day, it's a nice, well-balanced sort of thing, and it fits into the larger scheme of things.
Mm-hmm. Anil, I'd like you to talk about the politics behind the budget. Of course, it is an election year budget. Did it really come across as a populist budget?
Not really. It's not a budget where you give away freebies like a laptop or a iPad or whatever it is. It's more a very focused budget. If you, like Sukumar said, if you connect the dots, you get a very big picture. Mm-hmm. So if you connect his dots, it's a very strongly political budget. He's targeted youth, he's targeted women, and he's targeted for the first time a demography which normally does not get the flavor of the budget, which is the lower middle class, the new aspirants, the people who have just come into this new modern India, this new rocking India, as it were, and targeted them to exploit them and to target their aspirations. Mm-hmm. If you go look at his proposal, the key part is the interest, almost like an interest-free loan for anything less than 21 lakhs to build a house. Mm-hmm. So this is a major aspirational issue with most Indians, and particularly the young lot who are joining the workforce. So politically, it's a very clever budget, and Congress is ready to go to the polls anytime. So that's the message that comes through from the budget, but not in big flourishes. Very important to see little dots that connect into a larger picture.
Right. Monika, as a Aam Aadmi, a common man, does this budget leave extra money in my pocket?
Not at all. Only for the initial threshold level of income, which begins at 2 lakh to 5 lakh. That chunk of population has got a little bit of a relief. But overall, there has been no change in either the tax rates or the exemption limits. But I think we weren't looking for it because the treasury has really been empty. Right. So I think he's worked more at telling the household that we will all have to grow out of this mess. The country is in a mess. There's nothing for me to give you right now. And I think he said it in many ways. Like Anil says, you have to connect the dots. And he's saying, look, there is nothing to give, but you will have to grow out of this. And just to make you feel a little bit better and to get more income for the government, let's go and tax the rich.
Right. We'll come to that point of taxing the rich a little later. But Sukumar, you alluded to the fact that he had set up these high expectations. He's a kind of finance minister who peps up the sentiment, basically. Of course, since the time he took over the corner office at the North Block, he had started a reform agenda. Do you think this budget takes that process forward?
See, when you look at the reform agenda, you'll have to see what's possible, right? That's the first thing. And then if you look at all the easy things, they've all been done. Right? So when you're speaking of reforms, now you're really speaking of really significant measures. I think what we should look at is 2 or 3 things. One, what's he done in terms of the fiscal deficit?
Right.
2, what's he done in terms of welfare schemes? 3, has he somehow managed to achieve a balance between the two? Now, the bottom line is he has, right? He's made a lot of assumptions, right? He's made assumptions about how much increase in tax revenue he'll get. He's made assumptions on how the subsidy bill will go down, especially with respect to fuel subsidy. And he's also made some assumptions on the sum of money that will come from disinvestments and from the sale of spectrum, which is very, very significant. Now, we have to take all these at face value. The fact is, they may not pan out, but these are assumptions that you're making at the beginning of the year when you're trying to balance an equation. So you have to take them at face value. And on the basis of those assumptions, if you look at it, I think it's a very, very pragmatic budget in terms of what it manages to achieve. It sends out the right signals to the rural population, the people who really count as voters. The middle class also counts to some extent, but these people are really the people who call the shots. And if you look at the message that it sends out to them, he's not taking anything away from them. All the welfare schemes continue.
Right.
He's made significant announcements for women. Some of these may be symbolic, right? The Women's Bank, for instance. I've heard some cynicism about this, which is fine. But I think at the end of the day, it's symbolic. And in terms of, I think it will send the right message out to at least a few people. People like us might sneer at it and say, like, listen, we were speaking of equality and everything else. Does it really make so much of a difference? Mm-hmm. So I think from that perspective, if you look at it, it's a very pragmatic budget. And final point, it doesn't send out any negative messages, right? There's, of course, the stock market has reacted to this uncertainty over the Mauritius thing. I think that's one of those things that could get cleared out. In fact, press conference with him was going on as I walked into the studio, and maybe it will get addressed then. And he also hinted at the fact there are more things in store when he gives his reply to the budget. That was one of the first he said that in one of his first answers at the press conference. So maybe something is there, but at the end of the day, no strong negative messages to investors. I'm not speaking about stock market investors. Okay, I'm speaking about companies who want to invest in this country, because at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? We're not really talking about portfolio money. So from that perspective, I think it's an interesting budget because it says all the right things in terms of politics. It doesn't say any of the wrong things in terms of economics. So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. It says the right things in the context of the politics. What sort of a political mileage do you think the government may be able to draw, given that this kind of a tone has been set by the budget? Do you think UPA will reap some benefits in the upcoming budget, in the upcoming elections?
No. The upcoming elections, you mean the state elections? A big picture will not really play out in a national picture story is not going to play out in a state election. If the general elections are advanced, yes. But it's a general election is a year away, it's a long time. There are too many risks, downside risks in the economy. Just to add to what Sukumar is saying, the pragmatic part, it's the ethos with which he has thought this budget out is, if you can't do good, don't do harm. So that is a very important signal, because this is an election year. He could have gone the route of being, with big flourishes, said I'm spending this, I'm spending that. But he had an eye on the issue of RBI, on the issue of rating agencies. So he didn't want to rock the boat at that level. So this level, he didn't touch any of his big spend. So that is the one big ethos. The second is, he's taken the spending. He knows he has conceded very obviously that he doesn't have the money to spend. So he's taken that spending out and transferred it to the market, as it were, to people, to the consumers, by giving them that little edge. So these tax tweaks he has done are not huge, but they are very marginal, and they are targeted at a new class of consumers. So I think it's very clever, even market economics that he's used. So on paper, net, very clever budget, and I think, like I said, when you can't do good, don't do harm.
Monika, you had mentioned about taxing the super rich. Now, how does that aspect of the budget play out?
I think we've all seen the growing inequality in the incomes, and especially that what Anil said, the new emerging class. The disparity is huge, and he's kind of tried to reduce that a bit by saying that the super rich do need to pay a little more. So people who are earning more than 1 crore of income now will have to pay a 10% surcharge on their incomes over 1 crore every year, and that's, I think, for a year right now. But these things really are difficult to get back. Also, he's tried to catch hold of property transactions. So the rich invest in real estate, and real estate deals over 50 lakh will have a 1% tax deducted at source. That again is very positive, because that's where a lot of money sits. And that's also a very clever way of getting hold of who's doing what, because a lot of these deals are not really reported. The PAN cards are not there. But if this tax comes in, then there is more of a gaze on who's doing what there. Then their consumption is getting taxed. So we can argue if mobile phones over 2,000 rupees are used by the super rich or not, but that will be marginally more expensive. Imported cars, bikes, yachts, these are obvious, conspicuous consumption. We see them on the roads as we are driving, super rich. So those will also get more expensive. So overall, he's tried to say that, look, this is this body of people who have the money, and his target is about almost 4,500 crore, 4,400 crore from this
The
set.
segment.
So it's an interesting piece there. I don't want to let this go without mentioning that he's given a decisive statement on implementation of the FSLRC report, which is deep reform of the financial sector. He has said that we will examine it, and if we agree with it, we will act decisively. So I think there's a rich comment there for the next few months to look at.
Okay, finally, we try to conclude this discussion by giving you the last word on, do you think the budget could have been better than what it was?
Anything could have been better, right? So the budget could have been better. But I take heart from the fact that it could have been much worse, right? And it wasn't.
Okay. What's your thoughts on this, Anil?
Oh, ditto.
Monika, any
That's right, yeah. In a pre-election year, he could have really done damage, and he's not.
All right. On that note, I think we'll wind up this discussion. The bottom line, if you can't do any good, don't do any harm. With that, it's a wrap on this discussion, but stay tuned to Mint TV for more updates on Budget 2013.